Is Rishi Sunak about to lose his marbles? You've probably seen in the news all the fuss about the Parthenon marbles, as I'm going to call them, even though that's technically not correct, because the ones in dispute aren't all from the Parthenon. But there's a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, you can probably guess where my views lie. Also, one of my friends is the lawyer acting for the Greek government, trying to get them back, and I really like having kneecaps. But yeah, what were they saying when they say, well, the law does not permit the marbles to be repatriated? That is true at the moment, but it's a bit more complicated than that. Basically, national museums, like the British Museum and the National Gallery, they have what are called deaccession policies. Deaccession is letting things go from their collection, either selling it, giving it back to somebody, or just disposing of them. And that's set by legislation. The current rules are that a public state-owned museum or gallery can only get rid of things in certain conditions apply. They are, for instance, that the item is unfit for display. In other words, it's not suitable. Say somebody leaves a bequest of some fantastic piece of art, but they leave it to the National History Museum. It's not really their sort of thing. There is a bit of a thing now as to whether or not museums and galleries can refuse bequests. They can actually, so I don't think you can just clear out your attic and leave it all to the V&A. So that's one reason. The other is that basically it's no longer suitable. In other words, it's decayed so much, it's dropping to bits, the maintenance is too much to make it actually worthwhile keeping, and also it's just it's just not displayable anymore. Then they can get rid of it. There's also a policy where they can theoretically get rid of duplicates, although it's not as straightforward as going, well, we've got two of these, so we can get rid of one. I mean, they might say, well, we've got like all the sort of Lindisfarne chest pieces, so we can get rid of all but one of them. That's not quite how it works. There's also a different policy about human remains, although they do keep human remains, but generally speaking, it's easier to give back if somebody can go, oh, you've got Granny's sort of like a skull in your display, and we'd like it back. Also, museums can de-access to other state museums, so they can sell and they can transfer works that way. But generally speaking, getting rid of them to the general, just getting rid of them generally, it would require a change in the law. However, it's just legislation. The government could change that tomorrow. They could just pass a amending piece of legislation saying, create a statutory instrument saying the relevant Secretary of State can sign off on this. So, although yes, technically speaking, at the moment it would be against the law can easily be changed. That's not the same in some countries. In France, for instance, their constitution says that any works in a public gallery belong to the people. And therefore no individual government can actually get rid of them, even by passing legislation without amending the constitution. But they have done that, but that's in relation to human remains. We also have something called the Waverley Criteria. Say somebody, this is for things that are in private hands, but say there's an important piece of artwork or some historical artifact and it's over 50 years old, and somebody wants to get rid of it, sell it abroad. They can sell it within the country, no problem, but to be sold abroad, it needs an export license. And there's a thing called the Waverley Committee, which is a bunch of people, and if the item ticks any one of three boxes, or more than one box, then they can actually hold the granting of an export license. And those criteria are: is it something that is important to the nation, historically important? Second one is it something of particular aesthetic value? It's an important piece of art. And the third is it useful educationally? If it ticks any one or more of those boxes, then they can hold back on the license for a period of time for the seller to seek out, alternative purchasers, so it remains in the country. But this crops up a lot, you see, with deaccession, because who do you give it back to? Because populations change, boundaries change. So, you know, when you get Mesoamerican artifacts, well, you know, the old Aztec and Mayan empires, they don't line up with modern borders. So if you find something and you're not quite sure, you know, where exactly it came from, which country gets it back? This cropped up with a treasure ship, actually. They found an old treasure ship that was worth billions, quite literally. And it was like, yeah, we found all this. And Peru got very happy about it because it was in Peruvian waters. But then the Spanish government said, well, hang on a second. At the time, Peru didn't exist. It was just a Spanish colony, so that's our ship. And that all went to court. And actually, Spain got to keep it. You know, there's been similar things with the Benin bronzes, because, you know, the argument is giving them back to the current government. The current government is basically the descendants of the people who stole these and sold them. So that's a very controversial area. And this also crops up with Holocaust art, which it actually is an exception to the deaccession policies. If you can identify that this was like looted artwork, you know, in the sort of pre-war and during the war period, then the situation there is it's slightly easier to give them back. Then of course you get into the limitation though. You know, you find this thing and say, well, hang on a minute, I've just realised that's the painting that's been missing from my family for 80 years. But, you know, limitation gives you a certain amount of time to bring a claim. Limitation runs from when you have notice. So you can say, well, actually, yes, this painting was stolen 80 years ago, but I've only found out like last year where it is. Then you can bring a claim. But interestingly, Liz Taylor, actually, her dad was an art dealer. And as a wedding present, when she married Richard Burton the first time, he basically let her pick any painting she wanted. And she picked a particular painting, and it turned out to be looted Holocaust art. It had been stolen from a Jewish family by the Nazis. So when they found this out, they sued. They said, hang on a second, that's our family's painting. However, the court ruled that because the wedding had been in like every sort of, you know, journal and gossip page, and the painting had been mentioned there, that's when the notice period ran from. You know, so if you want to keep an eye on, you know, get your art back, then you need to sort of be looking at the gossip and society pages, apparently. When you do claim, actually, it's an interesting thing because the word you claim in Replevin in everywhere except England. Over here we call it conversion, which is, you know, the civil version of theft. It's like, I either want my property back, or if I can't get my property back, I want damages in lieu. In some jurisdictions, that's split. Replevin is the please give it back, and conversion is, okay, you can't give it back now for whatever reason, but I want compensation. So there you go. Like I say, actually, just to add on to that, in New York, actually, they introduced a statute that extended the limitation period for a while because of all the controversy over, you know, basically clearly stolen artwork not being returned. So there was a period, it's gone now, but for a couple of years it was like, right, quick, get in now if you want to sue. But so there you go. So yeah, essentially, they could easily give the marbles back just by a tweak of the law. So there's no constitutional issues there. But you know, it's all down to politics. Anyway, as always, hope you found that vaguely interesting and vaguely useful. I'm in a really nice space. It's a really nice arts cafe that I like, and also they do vegan cake. But I came here because I thought it'd be quiet, and I walked into a drag performance, which was fantastic, and to be honest, far more entertaining than this. So I wish I'd have started filming earlier. But there you go. I'll see you next time.